Welcome to Planet People, a podcast that aims to inspire curiosity and cultivate a deeper connection with the natural world.
We are thrilled to be sharing stories with you that highlight the beauty and importance of protecting our planet's wildlife.
Be sure to follow us on social media and your favorite podcast streaming platform so that you never miss an episode. Hey, Coral.
Hi, Natalie, and hey, Planet People. Welcome back to a really cool episode.
One of my favorites of the season because it's so deceiving in a way.
Yeah, and if you haven't already seen in the cover art, this is a little bit different, but still part of our desert series. But fun because it's actually about the Antarctic, which is technically a desert.
Yes, it's a dry desert, and most people, when they think of Antarctica, do not know that it's actually an arid ecosystem. But it is, and it is actually a great place to study fossils, which is why I'm so excited to introduce one of my favorite people that I've met in my life and in my careers, my mentor, Dr. Steve Emslie. And he studies paleontology, which is basically the study of fossils and bones. And in addition to that, he's also an ornithologist, specializing in the study of Adélie penguins in Antarctica.
Penguins, we love penguins.
Yes.
I know I do.
I love penguins. He has some really cool fun facts about penguins that he shares on this story, along with great comparisons about the Adélie as well as the emperor penguin, and some really interesting differences between those two species, along with great stories about his journey and a really special guest feature from a famous penguin fossil that is in his lab, which you'll see in this video if you tune into the live stream on YouTube.
And if you're not listening on YouTube, then definitely go on our social media, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. We're on all of them. And we'll also post the famous little guy there, or girl. I don't know what it is.
I know, right? Well, it's really cool. They're still using that fossil to help with other studies around the world. Like in Amsterdam, I think he was mentioning that they're using part of the fossil to help with a disease. Or
Wow.
DNA extraction from the fossil.
Yeah.
To help with, I think, some virus. Yeah. I'm forgetting what it was, but I know that's what he mentioned in the episode.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was COVID.
Yeah. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, some respiratory.
Like a strain of COVID or something, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a great episode, though. You guys will love it.
I just love penguins so much. They're the best. If you're of my age range, and you're like me, I played a lot of Club Penguin.
That's right. Love Club Penguin.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I would still play Club Penguin. I don't know if it's still around.
Should we get a Planet People Club Penguin thing going here?
I would totally 100%.
Hey, Hugh and Ava on Club Penguin playing those igloos. Remember the pizza? Remember making the candy pizza?
Yes, the pizza and yeah.
That's bringing me back.
There's so many good games on there.
Ooh.
Love it.
Don't tempt me with a good time.
I think it's the only video game I ever put money into because I wanted to have the cool outfits.
Oh, the cool outfits and the igloos.
Yeah, there was a time where I was swagging out on Club Penguin.
That was a proud time in my life. I'm happy to admit it.
It's true.
That was the Tamagotchi era and the Webkins. And Webkins.
Yes, Webkins.
Okay, I won't go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, so freak or force, the Adélie penguin. What do we think? I personally think that they are a force of nature because you'll hear some really interesting things about them, that they seem to be very adaptable almost to the climate changing, because they're able to be on both ice and land. So I kind of find that to be super interesting about the Adélie penguin specifically. And so to me, they're a force of nature because they're adaptable, it seems, and they are also really quick to mate and reproduce. And so they're knocking it out, right? Like they're like, we're sticking around this planet.
I would have to agree, force of nature, because of their resiliency to adapt to these changing climates. And also, yeah, the land and ice thing is important because you'll learn later that empire emperor penguins can only like breed in colonies on ice. I won't give away any more, but I would have to say force of nature as well for the
Yeah.
same reasons
And so
you
what
mentioned.
is your breath of fresh air for today?
My breath of fresh air, I would have to say are these Santa Ana winds coming through Southern California right now. It's been a really nice mild temperature. It feels like this is San Diego's summer, and I'm really appreciating just going for nature walks with Zach and getting outside when we can.
Nice. My breath of fresh air is not necessarily something that happened to me today, but I'm going to relate it back to penguins. My best friend was in Peru and saw the penguins down in Peru while we were recording this episode with Steve. And I saw her right after she got back from her trip. And the way that she was just like, she absorbed so much knowledge about those Peru penguins. And she was just showing everyone videos and pictures, but like educating everyone. And I was like so proud to see one of my friends just be like spewing all of these fun facts about, a bird that's so far away from all of us and how important it is to protect them. And I was just kind of like a proud friend for a moment. So that was like my breath of fresh air as it
Mm,
relates to this episode.
I can feel it. Is that
Yeah.
Kristen?
Yeah.
She
Shout
saw
out her.
penguins?
Oh yeah, she saw the Peru penguins. She did like the whole Patagonia thing that Brooke did. Like the
Oh,
whole,
cool.
yeah, I'll have to fill you in about it because it's really cool.
What? She saw penguins, dude?
Yeah, I'll send you a picture. She sent me one of them doing
I'm
it.
jealous.
I'll post the video of the penguins doing it that she sent me.
No way. Are they
Yeah, she
big
was there.
penguins? What are they like?
Um, Let me see.
Wow, I'm loving this penguin moment
I
for
couldn't I
us.
couldn't tell the scale.
I'm
When
loving this penguin moment. Indeed. We also talk about some of our favorite penguin movies in this episode, which there was totally an era of penguin movies, like right alongside Club Penguin.
Dude, shout out Surf's Up. If you know me,
Yes.
you're listening, you
Surf's
already
Up
know.
is a great movie.
That is my absolute hands down favorite
The chicken surfer, that
Chicken
guy's so
Joe.
funny, Chicken
Chicken
Joe.
Joe. And shout out to that guy in Hawaii. So when Natalie and
Oh
I were in
yeah.
Hawaii, we we were
What
out
was that thing about Chicken
we
Joe?
were on we were in Waikiki and we were like on this like pier thing. And I don't know, all of a sudden this guy said a Chicken Joe quote and I was like, Chicken Joe! Like,
Oh
in the water
yeah. That's
surfing. And we just had
right.
this like awesome moment about Chicken Joe while he was in the water surfing. I'm like on the pier.
That's right. That was
Yeah.
so funny.
Yeah.
That was such a great trip. Take me back to Waikiki and jumping off the rocks in Waimea Bay on the North Shore.
So fun.
Uh, we could
Anyways,
go on and on.
enjoy this episode with Dr. Steve Emslie.
Yes, my long-term mentor, such a great guy. And hopefully the next episode about Antarctica will be when Planet People takes their own trip down there to help Steve document his journey.
Be
That
so
would be sick. I'm manifesting that. So you heard it here first. Planet People takes Antarctica 2027, maybe?
it'll happen one day.
Maybe in like the end of 2027, like after we go to Hawaii and do our Planet People bit in Hawaii, then we do Antarctica.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, enjoy this episode. Hey, Planet People. We have on a very special guest today, one of my mentors and old professors from UNCW, Dr. Steve Emslie. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks for being here, and I'm joined by my co-host, Coral Carson. Hi, Coral.
Hi, planet people. We are so excited and so happy to have a University of North Carolina, Wilmington professor here. This is where me and Natalie met, and it's a wonderful college. If you're considering going to college for any sort of environmental studies, highly recommend it. I went there for film, also recommend it for that too. But we're here to talk about all of the fun environmental stories that Steve has.
So, Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about your research at UNCW and what you do for a living?
Okay, yeah, sure. I was hired here as a marine ornithologist in 1998. So I came as an assistant professor. And at that time, I had already been working in the Antarctic since 1992. So I just brought that research program with me. And I've been here then and ever since, teaching classes in the Department of Biology and Marine Biology. I'm a full professor now. And I still do work in the Antarctic. I'll be going back again this January. So that hasn't stopped at all.
It's incredible. And Steve and I know each other because I was actually in one of his classes. I guess that was 2018, so a long time ago it feels like now. But I was completing my biology minor, and to fulfill those credits, I was taking some really exciting biology classes, and one of them was Antarctic ecology with Steve. And so, sure enough, I was sitting front row. I remember being
Yes, I
up there and
remember.
excited.
Yes. Now, this is a class I put together and designed that's fairly unique class because it covers Antarctic ecology, geology, history, and policy. So everything about Antarctica. And I've also turned it into a podcast. It's on Spotify called All About Antarctica. It just gives a brief summary of each of 19 lectures for free, ad free, and that's available too. So it gives a summary of the whole class.
I highly recommend if you're tuning into this episode, checking out Steve's podcast because you can really get taken into this beautiful world that he created where he talks all about Antarctica. And it certainly captivated me. And listening back on some of those episodes really brings me back to being front row and center in Steve's class.
Thank you. Yeah.
And the reason that we're talking to Steve today is because of his Antarctic research and twist, something that I didn't know. The Antarctic is considered a desert, which is
Hmm.
why we're talking about it today in our desert themed podcast to give you guys a little bit of a twist and turn. And let's define exactly why the Antarctic is a desert. I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be hot to be a desert. Deserts are defined by the amount of precipitation per year. And a true desert is less than 5 inches of precipitation per year. And so it can be a cold desert where you get some of that precipitation as snow, or it can be a hot desert. And the Antarctica being centered above at the top of the world, at the bottom of the world, and with a high pressure system always above it, then it gets very little rainfall. So maybe less than 2 inches per year. So it defines itself as a true desert and but a very cold one. So cold desert for sure.
And what can you expect to find in Antarctica that indicates it's a dry desert in terms of studying the geology, the biology? What does it take to survive in Antarctica?
It takes a lot of special adaptations, and most of the species that exist there are actually marine adapted, marine species like penguins and marine mammals. The terrestrial habitat is so limited, there's only about 2% of the continent exposed. The rest is under ice. So what you have on that 2% in most of the Antarctic is just a few plants like lichens and mosses, a few invertebrates in the soil. Soil bacteria can be there too. In the northern Antarctic Peninsula, which juts out farther to the north and is a little milder in climate, you do have two flowering plants, a grass and a pearlwort, but that's it. They're not pollinated. They spread by wind, and that's how they exist there. All small leaves and cope with the cold, dry conditions, and so you don't have anything larger than small invertebrates that are fully terrestrial in the Antarctic.
And so, with that being said, what would you say is the primary challenge that this life faces in a rather dry and cool environment? When is it the most extreme time of year? What do the temperatures look like when you're there? And again, just kind of leaning off of those adaptations, what does it take?
Well, surviving that winter, because in the winter it's dark 24/7. and it's cold, and the temperatures can plummet down on the polar plateau down to over a minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it can get pretty cold. And believe it or not, there are species that actually live on the polar plateau, bacteria in the ice, and they can survive throughout the winter in a dormant state. And some of the invertebrates also survive in a dormant state throughout the winter, and then just become active in the brief summer period of about 3 months or so when there's enough sunlight to give the warmth and moisture that they would need to survive. So that's how they do it.
It's incredible what kind of life forms can survive in such arid conditions, especially in a place as freezing as Antarctica. And so when you go to Antarctica, what are you doing to prepare for this kind of weather to do your research?
Well, the great secret of Antarctica is that it's not that bad in the summer. It's almost 24/7 daylight. And if you're along the coast area, it can be at freezing or slightly below. And so you can work outside quite comfortably with the right clothing. You can even camp, and it's not bad because I've camped before, and the tent heats up too much in the sun all night. You have to open the flaps.
Oh, wow. That's not something you would think.
No, and then when it clouds up, it might get colder. But what really controls things is the wind. So there are lots of winds in the Antarctic, winds that surround the continent that are pretty constant, and winds coming off the polar plateau, katabatic winds that can change things where you have to go inside, you can't work outside. So those are the conditions that you have to just be flexible about and work outside when you can, and be ready for being inside for a while when you can't.
I remember you talking about the katabatic winds. I just had never heard that term before. And it basically just describes this intense force of wind that comes off of the continent, right? And sweeps over.
Right, yeah, because the polar plateau is up to 9,000 feet high, and you have these valleys and canyons with glaciers in them coming down off that plateau around the edge. These winds form because the cold air right above the ice on those glaciers gets forced down by warmer air above, especially in the summer. And that warm air helps push it down and create the force of that wind as it channels down these valleys and out onto the sea. So they can be pretty intense, hurricane force winds at times.
Wow. Are there any similarities with, we're focusing on the Mojave Desert here in Southern California. Are there any similarities that you see with a desert like ours and Antarctica? I guess other than the fact that it's low precipitation.
Yeah, they're both extreme environments, and an extreme desert especially compares to the Antarctic because of species that are, plants that have small leaves or no leaves, and small invertebrates live in the soil. Bacteria lives in the soil. They might go dormant for a while in the hottest periods in an extreme desert. And so you get those kinds of similarities. There's even a lichen called endolithic lichen that lives inside rock, inside sandstone, and it still can photosynthesize, several centimeters or several millimeters down inside the rock. And you get those in extreme deserts too. So they have that similarity. Both areas, extreme deserts and the Antarctic, can be models for determining whether or not life could exist on Mars as well. And many studies have been done with extremophiles in looking at that kind of possibility too.
Interesting. What's the verdict that you've heard of?
Well, the average temperature on Mars is actually warmer than some of the temperatures reached on the polar plateau. So if species can survive on the polar plateau, then you'd think species could survive on Mars too.
Yeah.
So and there's been a lot of investigation on Mars about possibilities of life and previous life on that planet. And there's been some evidence that it has existed.
Wow. So cool.
Would that life also be considered what you called an extremophile?
Yes, though it's all relative because these species exist in these extreme environments, but they're quite comfortable there. So to them, it's not extreme. To us, it's extreme. It's our definition of extreme. So that's where that comes from. Life is more limited, of course, because of those extreme conditions. But yeah, those species are adapted to that. So they're just fine with it. We could not be.
Right.
And speaking of surviving as humans in an environment like this, when you go to do your research, kind of shifting the conversation a little bit about your Adélie penguin work, what does that look like when you are in that kind of environment? Like, let's say you're doing work outside and suddenly a wind force comes through. How do you prepare for something like that?
Yeah, that can happen suddenly, so you have to be ready for those kinds of things. I've been working in the field where a sudden whiteout comes through, and you can't see 5 feet in front of you. So you either have to wait it out if you can get out of the wind and be sheltered. In my case, I was close enough to our hut that I could walk along the beach and hear the sound of the waves and stay oriented that way and get to the hut okay. So that can happen. Other times you can be just in really windy conditions. Winds can come up all of a sudden. And the best thing to do if you're not close to shelter is find some kind of shelter. You can get behind boulders, or you can do something to get out of that wind until you can safely get back to where there's shelter. And so you just have to watch out for those kinds of things, and know that always be alert to the possibility of sudden weather changes.
Mm. An extreme environment calls for very unpredictable weather patterns. I've definitely experienced that myself too, working in the Mojave, where a haboob came out of nowhere.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just this giant dust storm, and trucks on the highway were tipping. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's that same type of wind force that funnels over the eastern Sierra Nevada. I forget the name of it, but there's kind of like another term I think that Native Americans call this force of wind coming over the eastern Sierras. And it just reminds me of the katabatic winds maybe going over that polar plateau. And I felt that type of crazy, intense hurricane wind in a desert environment. And it's a little frightening, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Now I've been in severe thunderstorms like that too, and you just have to, wait it out, get in the best place possible and wait it out.
So today you mentioned that you were speaking to your class about seabirds in Antarctica. I thought that would be a good lead-in to kind of paint a picture a little bit more of what your field work studying Adélie penguins looks like. And maybe you can kind of give us a brief overview of, the seabird life on Antarctica, and a little bit of biology kind of fun facts maybe about the penguins that you're studying. And then we can get into kind of your day-to-day research and what that looks like.
Okay, sure. Yeah, there are about 5 species of penguins that breed in the Antarctic, but only 2 are endemic, and that's the emperor and the Adélie. The others are more subantarctic that just get into Antarctica in the peninsula again, where it's a little bit milder and warmer climate, like the Gentoo penguin, the chinstrap penguin, and macaroni penguin. But the true ice-loving penguins are the emperor and Adélie, and I've not worked with the emperor. I've seen them down there, but to work with them, it's more difficult because they nest in the middle of winter. Their breeding cycle is so long because they're a large bird, produce one big egg. It takes a long time to produce that egg, about 40 days for the female to produce the egg. It takes about 2 months of incubation after that. And then you have to raise the chick to the point where it fledges, has shed its down, and it's gotten its real feathers, it can go to seed. That all takes so long that if they tried to breed in the summer, then it would be winter before the chick was ready to go to sea, and they would probably not make it. So they've adapted to start breeding in the middle of winter, and by the time that chick is fledging, then it's summer, and they can find plenty of food when they go to sea for the first time and survive that first critical winter. The Adélie penguin, it's more of a summer breeder. It's smaller penguin. They lay 2 eggs instead of 1, and they are nesting on land instead of ice like the emperor penguin. So they come ashore in October or so, come back to these colonies and nest sites, rebuild their nest. Their incubation period takes about 35 days, and they can fledge the chicks by February or so, or the end of the Antarctic summer. And they go to sea then at a time when there's still plenty of food for them to get that food and get ready for their first winter. And if they survive that first winter, then they'll probably survive for a number of years after that. But that's what the cycles are different than for these 2 different species. And so I began working with Adélies in 1992, helping a colleague of mine, Dr. Wayne Tribalpiece, who was studying Adélies, chinstraps, and gentoos on King George Island in the peninsula. So all 3 species were right there. And we were also working on other seabirds, giant petrels, brown skuas, South Polar skuas. And so it was a real thrill for me to be able to be part of that project. And I ended up going 3 years in a row helping Wayne with data collection down there. And it was so amazing to me and such a beautiful spot that I needed to figure out a way to develop my own research project. and and I had an archaeological background, and I started looking at these Adélie penguin colonies that had built up all these pebble mounds because they used pebbles to build their nests. There's not enough vegetation. And over time, the pebbles and these nests, the pebbles fall apart, and the nests are rebuilt, and then the sediments build up, and all these organic remains are preserved in the soil. So I thought I could excavate these old mounds and get information about penguins and their activities in the past, how long ago they were there, and what their diet was, and so forth, from the prey remains preserved in the sediments. And sure enough, when I did a practice excavation in one old mound, there was all these bones and things that were preserved there. So I started exploring that more, got some more funding for that from the National Science Foundation, and started putting together a story of the paleohistory of Adélie penguins. And I'm still doing that today.
Wow.
So it's been really an interesting project, and I never get tired of going down there and working on these studies. And now I'm working mainly in the Ross Sea instead of the peninsula, which has got even longer and better preservation than the Antarctic Peninsula.
Wow. That's awesome.
I know. Isn't it so cool listening to his stories?
Yeah, they're so cute, the Adélie.
Yeah.
And I see some pictures behind you too.
Yeah, that's the Ross Sea behind me, and some my students have made some penguin drawings
That's
that
cool.
I put up on my wall. But
So,
in the Ross Sea, it's been really great because it's so cold and dry there that you get open air mummification of tissues. And in the peninsula, you get a lot more rainfall, so you don't get the preservation that you get in the Ross Sea. And so when I excavate the sites in the Ross Sea, I get more feathers and eggshell and bone, and even penguin chick mummies that preserve for thousands of years. And I actually have one right here.
oh, let's see it.
There it is.
It's
This
so
is
much
one of
bigger
the
than I thought it
first
would be.
ones I found in 2001, and it's from a place called Cape Barn on Ross Island. And this chick was about 10 centimeters under the soil when we found it, and we've been able to it's got all the tissues on it. It's got feathers, skin, even the bill and toenails are on it, and bone inside. So we can analyze those tissues for stable isotopes, radiocarbon dating. And now, most recently, a colleague of mine in Germany is studying these for recovering ancient RNA viruses from these tissues, and has been successful at doing that. So that's a new part of this new phase of this study. New technology comes along, and all these remains I've been collecting for over 20 years are still useful for new kinds of studies. So that's our latest one, is this RNA virus study. And the RNA viruses, they are rare to find beyond historic times because they don't preserve well, and they're related to coronaviruses. So knowing how they evolve is important. And this specimen I just showed you is about 300 years old.
Wow.
And I've got others that are a couple thousand years old or more.
Whoa.
They've actually produced some of these viruses that are preserved. So it's really exciting. And we're pursuing that some more. I've got some more mummy tissues I sent him just recently, and we'll see what they get out of those. So you never know what's going to come up next for what we can do with these specimens that are preserved in the Antarctic.
Wow, that's wild. So you use these specimens for, it sounds like, a number of different research reasons, one being this RNA virus research. What was it initially that you were looking at, and how has that evolved in your own practice?
Yeah, good question. Initially, I was doing just radiocarbon dating, where we would just understand the paleohistory of and the occupation history of certain areas. So let's say we have an area of coastline that's covered with abandoned colonies. We excavate and get the bones from the bottom of those sites where they first started to occupy those mounds, and do radiocarbon dating up the whole sequence in the excavation, just like you would in an archaeological site. And it tells us when they first arrived at that site, how long they were there, and when they abandoned it. And then the prey remains, and sediments can help us with what their diet was. There's fish otoliths, bones, squid beaks. They were all eating krill, but that doesn't preserve. And stable isotope analyses of their tissues, nitrogen and carbon especially, helps also tell us what their diet was in the past and if it's changed over time. So that was the initial studies that we were doing. Ancient DNA is another thing you can do with this material because it's so well preserved. You can recover the DNA and look at how that's changed and evolved over time. Some of these specimens go back beyond radiocarbon dating or over 45,000 years old. So we have an incredible long record, which is pretty unique for a living seabird to have a continuous long-term record of its tissues in the same place where it still lives today.
Yeah.
So that makes it pretty unique too.
And what have you seen that has changed over this course of time for them?
Well, the diet has been pretty consistent. It fluctuates a little bit with climate change. And it appears that they did eat more krill during the whaling era when whales were removed from the Southern Ocean. Up to 90% were removed in the whaling era in the 1800s into the 1900s. And that left an excess of krill in the ocean that they weren't consuming. The baleen whales were eating all the krill, but when they were removed, there was excess krill, and the penguins and fur seals benefited from that in that they ate mainly krill. And so their populations rebounded and expanded. And that's been known as a krill surplus hypothesis, and it's still being tested in the Antarctic. And some of the data show that maybe it wasn't as much of a change in diet as we thought. Other data show that they did change their diet quite a bit. So that's one of the questions we're still pursuing in the research I'm doing in the Ross Sea.
And I remember learning about the krill surplus hypothesis, and I'm curious to know now with the change in fisheries management and now that whales have made a comeback, especially humpback whales. I know that they have been removed from the IUCN list. What does that look like now for Adélie penguins that the whale populations have rebounded? What are you seeing currently with your studies about what their diet looks like, if there's less krill in the water, and is climate change also impacting like the krill surplus in the ocean? I'm curious about that aspect too.
Yeah, there's been other researchers that have done these studies that they've looked at changes in krill numbers occurring, especially in the peninsula area where the climate change has been the most severe because it's more northern, and there's been a lot more ice melt there, and krill populations are related to sea ice extent because the sea ice, when it forms every year, traps algae in it. That algae sits dormant over the winter, but then grows in the ice when the spring comes and sunlight hits that ice. And so the biomass of algae increases with more ice, more krill, and now there's less ice, so less krill. That's one thing that's been happening. And Adélie penguins have been declining in the Antarctic Peninsula because of the loss of krill. And whales are rebounding, so that's taking some of the krill. There's a krill fishery now too that's been around for a long time, and it was pretty intense for a while in the 80s, and it died down. Now it's picked up again, and that fishery is also competing for all this krill with the whales and now penguins too. So there's attempts to try to control the amount of krill being taken. This is all through Antarctic Treaty and treaty nations to make these agreements. And there's also the different areas of the Antarctic where the stock that is present varies. And so they set different limits with different areas. They're also trying to set up more marine reserves, marine protected areas that would provide that food consistently to the marine animals that need it with those protections. But those are difficult to get past because it has to be by consensus with the Antarctic Treaty nations. And not everybody has been agreeing with these, especially China and Russia. So when not everybody votes yes, then it doesn't pass. And so that's what's been happening lately with this trend. Adélies are still doing well in the rest of the Antarctic. They are declining in the peninsula, but they are stable or even increasing in parts of East Antarctica and the Ross Sea. So they're not endangered like the emperor penguin. but there are some concerns about the future for the species in these other areas.
And why do you think that they have, it seems, adapted in other areas versus the emperor penguin?
Well, the emperor penguin is primarily nests on sea ice, and lately it's been shown by some British researchers that with satellite imagery that some of these colonies on the sea ice, which you can recognize from satellites by the guano stains on the ice that really stand out, that these colonies are disappearing too soon before the chicks fledge.
Mm.
So by the time the summer comes, the sea ice is broken back to near the colony, and there are colonies around right on the edge of the ice that's connected to land called fast ice. And when that fast ice breaks out too soon in the summer, the chicks aren't ready to go to sea and they don't make it when that ice disappears. So several colonies have been lost. There was one colony lost in 2015 that they documented in the Weddell Sea, and now there was 4 out of 5 colonies lost on the base of the Antarctic Peninsula in 2022.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so if the emperor penguins would adapt to breeding on land, they'd be safer, but they're adapting to the ice. There's only been 1 or 2 colonies that have actually been on land. They do move their colony if they fail, and some of them have done that too. But there's only about 500,000 or 600,000 of these penguins left, and they are considered endangered in the Antarctic, and there's a lot of concern about their future. Adélie's breeding on land. They are doing better because of that. There are greater numbers, and they seem to be able to adapt to different diets pretty easily too. So they feed on krill, but also fish and squid, and even jellyfish have been recorded in their diet. So they have a pretty eclectic diet, and that's helping them as well. But they are ice adapted, and so as ice declines, then they might have trouble in other areas besides the peninsula.
Mm.
And Steve, you mentioned being able to see guano from satellite imagery. I'm familiar with what guano is, but maybe we should briefly explain what that is in case people do actually want to see that satellite imagery for themselves and then they know what to look for.
Yeah, well, quite simply, it's penguin poop. And it has a reddish color to it from all the krill in their diet. So when they poop on the snow, that really stands out. And when there's hundreds or thousands of them on the snow doing this, because they come ashore, they come onto the ice and fast for a long time while they're breeding. And so all that guano builds up, and you can see it quite easily from space then with this satellite imagery. And new colonies have been discovered by that same process. So they've been able to survey by satellite.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Penguin poop.
Yeah.
Steve, I remember you mentioning too, just on the topic of krill fisheries and management, a movie that your colleague had produced about the fisheries management in Antarctica. Remind me the name of that movie again.
Oh, The Last Ocean.
Yes, The Last Ocean.
Film about the Ross Sea and the MPA, the Marine Protected Area they were trying to get past there in 2016. David Ainley was the scientist who was really pressing the Antarctic Treaty Nations and CAMLR, the Committee for the Conservation of Antarctic Living Marine Resources, to pass this protection. And he saw the Ross Sea, where he's been working most of his career, as a place that was an intact marine ecosystem with very few disturbances. And it was one of the last left on the planet because it was so remote. But toothfish fisheries were starting to encroach on the Ross Sea, illegal fisheries, and that was of concern. And there's a complex food chain from algae to krill to fish to penguins and seals to whales, and all these species are interlocked in this food chain in this beautiful, intact marine system. And so the effort in this film was to show how they were trying to get all the nations to agree to pass this marine protected area. Again, had to be by consensus, and year after year it kept failing. But finally in 2016, they did pass this by consensus. They did pass a marine protected area there, though it's limited in its protections. And unfortunately, it has an expiration date, first MPA to have one, which sets a bad precedent. It's like 35 years. from 2016. And it could be changed or canceled if one nation decides they don't like it anymore. So there's a lot of unfortunate clauses to it, but at least it's a start. And a lot of people, including myself, who do research in the Ross Sea, are hoping that the more data we gather on what's happening there and what the penguins need or the marine mammals need to survive there, that this protected area could be expanded and extended into the future so that it ensures the conservation of these species in the Ross Sea.
Yeah, let's hope so. My goodness.
That was a great documentary.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching it and still feeling hopeful despite some of these unfortunate clauses you mentioned. And it just goes to show the very political influence that the Antarctic region has. And you mentioned bringing in policy, and I think if people are interested in learning more about it, that movie is a pretty good introduction to how complicated it is to protect places like that and do it well with an MPA that holds strong regulations and not have loopholes.
That's right. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959, starting with 12 countries, and that was under the Eisenhower administration. And Eisenhower was able to get people together to do this, and it was an amazing treaty because it protected Antarctica from military exercises and made it for peaceful purposes only. And it's been that way ever since. And so maintaining that treaty, I think, is essential for the future of Antarctica, because if that treaty was to end or break down, then there'd be a gold rush to the Antarctic for all of its resources, and it would just be destroyed. So hoping that never happens.
Yes, let's hope so.
I love that it's a place of peace, right? Where everyone can come together and use research that can benefit the whole region.
Yes, yeah. And I've been lucky in my research. I've been able to visit a lot of different country stations and work out of those stations. And everybody down there who's working in the Antarctic, all the scientists, doesn't matter what country they're from. They all help each other, work together, collaborate. If there's equipment they need or something to share, that's done, no problem. It's on the political side above them that people that aren't there where the problems might start.
Mm. That's nice to hear that you guys are very collaborative and, it's a place of peace, like you were saying. I love that.
It's one international community down there, so it's pretty good, yeah.
It's great. So going back to the Adélie penguins and maybe some emperor too, if we want to get into that, what are some fun facts or fun behaviors that you've seen each time that you go?
No, I never get tired of going, and I always see something new. And you could sit at a penguin colony and just watch them all day. It's amazing watching all their behaviors, how they feed their young, how they communicate, how they'll go to the sea and back, and or rest on the beach even. All these things are just fun to watch them do. And when they come ashore to feed their chicks, the chicks chase them around, chase their parents around to try to force them to feed them and keep harassing them over and over. It's fun to watch too.
I love that.
Yeah, it's just and they're just incredibly well adapted to the environment there, and sometimes even get too hot because if it's a windless day and they're in the sun, especially the chicks with their downy covering, they just warm up too much, and all they just do is lie down on the ground with their flippers out, and they don't move and just wait it out. So it's funny to know that they're too hot when we're cold down there. So it's just great to watch them and all their behaviors.
And what you mentioned seeing them communicate. How do they typically communicate with one another?
Well, they don't have much of a voice. They produce a kind of a braying call, and they have several different types of calls that they'll do. And they have a mating call where they bond with their mate, and they put their bill skyward, and they move their neck back and forth and their head back and forth, making this call. And so that allows them to learn each other's call in this bond that they have, and they can recognize each other by their calls from other individuals. So their hearing is really better than ours in terms of they've got a lot more sensory hairs in their cochlea in their ear, and that allows them to distinguish individual notes and calls that we can't. So they can recognize that individual there from that one over there by their call, and so they learn their mate's call that way. and their chicks the same way. So they can find their chick in the creche when they come back to feed them just by the call. The chick recognizes their call. So they're ensured of feeding the right chick when they come ashore.
And do they mate for life?
They do mate for life. Like most seabirds, it's important because it takes both parents to raise the young, and their reproductive success increases with the pair bond because they learn how to exchange in incubation duties, how to feed the chick and care for the chick together and coordinate those duties. And it takes them a year or two to learn all that with a mate. But if they keep the same mate, then they'll get better and better at reproduction, and they both benefit from that. So that's
how old are they when they get to the point where they're mating or they find their mate for the first time?
it's usually they might come back to the colony where they were hatched or nearby at another colony after about 2 years at sea. And
Okay.
and then they might practice, play house for a while, come to the colony maybe when they're 3 years old, and they'll come in too late to set up a nest, but they'll build a nest, kind of a lame little nest they'll build, and they'll call and advertise for a mate, and maybe they'll have a mate, and they'll kind of play around like they're going to breed, but then they don't because it's too late. And then the next year they'll come back and come back at the right time and set up a nest, and they'll probably fail, but they'll give it a shot. And then the year after that, they'll know what to do. And then they'll start breeding every year after that. So 4, 5, 6 years old before they really
Okay.
can be productive.
And how long do they typically live?
Well, it varies. Probably 8 to 12 years would be the average for most of them. So some of them can live longer. Some have been known to live up to 20 years, but that's unusual. So they face a lot of dangers too in the ocean and on land. So they might run into leopard seals out in the water at these colonies, and the leopard seals kill penguins regularly around the colonies. Though that's not their main diet. Leopard seals eat mainly krill. They just take advantage of an opportunity when they see it when they're near a penguin colony.
So I remember learning about thermoregulation in your class and being fascinated by that. I feel like that's a good fun fact to kind of define how Adelie penguins thermoregulate, kind of like what you're saying, how they go out on their bellies and lay
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
some other things that they do to thermoregulate? And what is thermoregulation?
Well, thermoregulation is maintaining the body temperature at a consistent level, and for birds, it's 41 degrees C. For us, it's 36 to 38 degrees C. So birds have a higher metabolism. And penguins in the Antarctic are no different. So they have that same metabolism at 41 degrees C. And they can maintain their body temperature as a warm-blooded animal, as an endotherm, with layered feathers and fat under their skin, thick skin and layers of fat. And the feathers are interesting because they have several different types of feathers. They grow all over their body like hair in mammals. Now, most birds, feathers only grow along certain tracts on the body and overlap. So they're not all over the body, but penguins are different. They are all over the body. And the different kinds of feathers they have are controlled by muscle action in the skin. So when they go into the water, they can flatten all their feathers down, all these layers of feathers, and seal their body almost like a wetsuit and swim without losing heat to the water. When they come ashore, if it's cold out and they've been ashore for a while, they can open up those layers of feathers and let air pockets come inside. And air is a good insulator, so it keeps them warm by insulating their body that way. If they're too hot, they have almost bare skin underneath their flipper and on their feet. And you see this especially when they first come out of the water from a swim because they've heated up and they need to cool down. So when they come ashore, they use countercurrent heat exchange. They shunt blood, warm blood, from their body center to these exterior areas and radiate the heat out of their flippers, out of their feet, and even out of their bill, and reduce their heat down that way to cool down. And then they can reshunt the blood to the interior when they're back to normal temperature and want to retain heat. So that's countercurrent heat exchange, it's called. That works pretty well with them too. So all these mechanisms help them: fat, feathers, their behavior, countercurrent heat exchange. It's ways that they can maintain their body temperature consistently, whatever the conditions are.
really cool that they're able to do that and generate that heat internally and then shunt it out through their legs and their flippers.
Mhm.
It's another incredible adaptation that really shows how resilient these species are in their ability to survive in such extreme environments, really, with the fact that they get so hot while you're cold, right? It just shows that they are totally able to survive there compared to us, where
Yeah,
maybe not so much.
yeah. And like I said, they're comfortable there. We may not be all the time, but they are, and they're well adapted to those conditions.
So I work in animation, so I have to ask, do you have a favorite animated penguin movie? Because there's a few of them.
Well, I haven't seen all of them, but Happy Feet, of course, is up there. It's pretty
Yeah.
good for seeing emperor penguins, and now they give the leopard seal and the skua a bad rap there, but
Yeah.
they're not that bad most of the time.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's a fun movie to watch.
Did you feel like Happy Feet was kind of accurate with the
I'm trying to.
representation?
It's been a long time since I've watched it, but I think for the most part it was.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some things that weren't quite. I just can't remember what they were right now, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's okay. Just it popularizes penguins and emperor penguins, especially in that movie. So that's good.
My favorite is Surf's Up. If you haven't seen it, I would
No,
recommend.
I've not seen it. What's that one about?
It's really fun. It's about I can't remember what penguin he was. I think he's
I think
a
it's the
northern
macaroni penguin.
rocker. No, he's a northern rockhopper
Oh
penguin.
yeah, okay, yeah.
And the main character. And it's a fun little animated movie. It's kind of like a mockumentary, and he leaves to go to a surf contest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I won't give too much away, but it's really fun. It's one of my favorite animated films, so I recommend it.
All right. Well, I'll have to look for that one.
Yeah.
Coral, where does that take place again? Isn't it kind of based like in Hawaii or something?
I don't know where. Let's look it up. Hold on. Surf's
Yeah,
Up.
it's a hilarious animated movie. I feel like in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, there was a trend around producing penguin movies. Like Happy Feet and Surf's Up came out around the same time. Lots
Hmm.
of good movies to watch about penguins. And the Ross Sea now. We'll definitely link those for our listeners to be able to find those movies in the documentary easily
Hopefully,
because
it's not Hawaii because that's the wrong hemisphere.
It's based on a fictional Polynesian island.
uh,
Okay. All right.
It's called Pengu Island.
All right.
It's so good. I definitely recommend it.
no, that's a good one.
Hmm.
While you were describing the penguins, ability to thermoregulate, it kind of reminded me of the desert tortoise, and that's a big species that we talk a lot about on this season, and all of their different adaptations to um, be able to survive the harshness of the heat in the desert.
That's right. Yeah, they have really good adaptations for coping with water loss and not enough water. Many
Mhm.
species do. So that you kind of see that with Antarctic species too, because all the water's frozen. And penguins, they get their water from the marine environment, so they have salt glands above their eyes that act as an extra kidney to help excrete all that salt. A lot of
Oh,
seabirds have that. Gulls have that too. And it kind of drips down their bill, and off the tip of their bill, it looks like they have a runny nose when they're excreting out of their salt glands. So that's an adaptation for
wow.
that.
So they have like kidneys above their eyes? That's crazy.
Yeah, they're not true kidneys. They're just called salt glands. So they're able to extract salt from the water in their blood and excrete it there out of those glands too.
So do they technically drink salt water then? And then it's
Yes, yeah, and
out?
their prey, they get a lot of salt in their prey, so that they need to extract. They will eat snow and get fresh water that way. I've seen penguins do that a lot. So
Oh.
especially when they're molting and they come ashore, they need to do that to keep their water content up.
And
But
what does molting mean?
molting is when they have to shed all their feathers, and all birds do this at least once a year, and they have to replace their feathers because they wear down and they lose their insulated properties. So it's a very energetic, expensive thing they do. It's usually after breeding that they do this. And for penguins, because they have such a short summer season with lots of food, they molt all their feathers at the same time instead of sequentially like most birds. And so all their body feathers, everything are molted in what's called a catastrophic molt. And it takes Adélie penguins a couple of weeks to do this. So when the breeding season's over and they've raised their chicks, they'll go to sea and feed, and they'll come back to a sheltered place where there's snow, usually so they can eat the snow, and just stay on shore and fast and molt. And when they drop all their feathers, they're not standing there naked, but the older feathers are being pushed out by the new ones that are growing in. So they look really ragged when they're doing this and very uncomfortable.
It's pretty funny.
And,
I
yeah,
was gonna ask, are they just left like bald for a bit, or I guess not if they have the feathers coming in?
yeah. So they don't have any bald spots at all. But they're still warm and insulated while they're doing this. And they need to do it at the end of the summer when they can finish that process and then go back to sea and feed again and regain energy. So it takes a lot of energy to replace all those feathers too. And then after that, then they have some time to spend in the winter before the following summer when they start breeding again.
And how long does that process typically take them?
The molting process,
Yeah.
that would be probably about for emperor penguins, it's about 4 weeks, and because they're bigger, and they do it on ice floes. So you see them floating by on an ice floe with all these feathers on the ice that they've dropped, and they're just waiting it out. For Adélies and the smaller penguins, it's only about 10 days to 2 weeks it takes to do that. And they do it on land or sometimes on ice.
10 days. That's, I feel like a quick turnaround.
Yeah, they're faster at that. So yeah, a couple weeks about.
Seems like a lot of the things that they do is on a much faster pace than the emperor penguins, even with the breeding and
Mhm. They have a short window to get started breeding, and if they can't find their old mate, then they'll get a new one right away because they only have that one shot to do this. And they have to lay all their eggs in synchrony in the colony, because if they don't, when the chicks are brushing, and that's when all the chicks are left alone in this kind of like a kindergarten, and they can huddle together and just hang out on the beach waiting for their parents to feed them. And when they're in this creche, they all need to be about the same age, because a chick that's off on the timing that might be smaller becomes a target to predators like skuas, and probably won't make it because they won't be able to fledge at the same time as the others. And so through natural selection, all these penguins come together at the same time, lay eggs at about the same time, so that all the chicks are in synchrony for this fledging period.
And when you say that they try to find their old mates, like are they separated for a time? Why do they have to go through a process of them finding their mate?
Well, some of them might stay together in the winter. I don't really know. I'm not sure how much this has been studied, but generally they're not together in the winter. They're in different places feeding. And so to find that mate, they come back to the same nest site. And that's why they have this strong site fidelity for these nest areas. And they'll come back to that site, and that's where they'll meet their mate again, find them there. And so that's also been driven through natural selection to have that same mate, and then of course better reproductive success by keeping the same mate.
And what's their behavior during the winter? Like their typical day?
Yeah, that's not much known because it's hard to get down there and study things in the winter, and then satellite tracking is difficult to do too. But we do know that they go out to the ice edge, because as ice forms around Antarctica in the winter, it can almost double the size of the continent. So they move out to the edge where they can gain access to the open water and feed still. And as far as we know, that's all they do, is they just hang out on the ice and feed for a while and just survive the winter. And they stay south, the Adélie penguins being endemic to the Antarctic, they stay south of the Antarctic convergence, or south of about 60 degrees southern latitude. So occasionally one will move north. And I was in New Zealand a couple of years ago, and a Adélie penguin showed up on one of the beaches there. So occasionally you get these stragglers that come outside of the Antarctic, but not that often.
Wow. Are they seen in Peru?
No, there's another kind of penguin there. That's the Magellanic and the Humboldt penguin are found on the coast of South America there. And then you get the Galapagos penguin all the way up on the Galapagos Islands. That's the farthest north the penguin gets on the equator. And so no penguins exist in the northern hemisphere. They're all southern. And their fossil record is all southern hemisphere too, going back 62 million years. So they've evolved for a long time in the southern hemisphere.
On the topic of very old birds, I feel like this is a good transition to kind of get into the next little bit of your research. Coral, if you're good with wrapping up kind of the Antarctic portion of the interview, I wanted our listeners to get a little bit of a tidbit of this other type of work you do in North America with the California condor. Well, we won't go too far into it since we're kind of nearing the hour, but I wanted to get an idea a little bit about what your research looks like with studying California condor fossils in the Great Basin region, and we can kind of tie it back in to our desert season here and learn a little bit about the condor as well.
Yeah, sure. No, my dissertation research was on the origin and evolution of condors in the New World and in North America. So I was looking at condor fossils from Florida, from Arizona, from California, and it's the living California condor has a record that goes back into the last ice age, and they were pretty extensive in Grand Canyon and all the way over to Texas. So I've found their fossil remains in caves and done research with them in caves in Grand Canyon, and now I'm studying them from caves in the Eastern Great Basin in eastern Nevada. So they like desert environments, and they forage over large areas. Large bird, they can forage over large areas, and we're finding a pretty good fossil record for them throughout the inland west in the last ice age. That they declined from the west pretty rapidly at the end of the Pleistocene, 10,000 years ago, when all the extinct megafauna like mammoths and mastodons and so forth all disappeared. That was their main source of food. And they survived along the coast of California into the historic times because there was a population there that fed more on marine carcasses that weren't affected by the Pleistocene extinctions. And that population was doing well, even starting to re-expand into Arizona in the 1800s when cattle, sheep, and horse were introduced by the Spanish. And but then died back again with poison carcasses and hunting and so forth, lead shot in the carcasses. So, I've looked at their history through all of this, and now we're looking at fossils from these caves in Arizona that are a separate species, Brea-gyps, which is fully extinct. It's abundant in the La Brea tar pits that were first described from the Ice Age, and now we have a pretty good record of it in eastern Nevada as well. So I'm really interested in that species right now and studying it and what its distribution was and why it went extinct. So there's a lot of interesting questions to answer still.
So what you're saying, there was two different species of condors. One is extinct and the other one is the California condor.
That's right. Yeah. California condor, it had a wide distribution in the Pleistocene throughout the inland west and even into Florida. But this other one had a more limited distribution. And it's known from just a few sites, La Brea, the sites in Nevada, and there's a couple of sites in New Mexico, and that's it. So it's more limited distribution, but it was pretty abundant locally at La Brea and in Nevada. So it's a fascinating species. A little bit different morphology than the California condor, but about the same size.
I am so just inspired by the California condor and the story of condors. I think it's so cool. I've always thought your bird research has been fascinating, but especially the California condor, just because of the success around the species. And while there's still, maybe only 500 individuals in the wild, it's still a great story. And any of your research dating back to studying this other now functionally extinct individual or species, is surely helping the California condor today. How does your research lend itself to understanding where we could maybe even potentially reintroduce the California condor today?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. And the work I did in Grand Canyon showed that they were living there and feeding on Pleistocene animals, but they could be reintroduced there because there's all the nest sites still and the wide open terrain. And sure enough, the reintroduction was done, and it they had to feed them first local game that's still around to get them used to that. But that worked. And now they're nesting actually in some of the same caves that I found Pleistocene fossils.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so they still have that attraction to these specific sites in the Grand Canyon, these caves that are up on remote cliffs and difficult to get to by terrestrial predators, so they're protected there. And so that was helping with the conservation effort. And then most recently, I did an analysis of condor remains, California condor remains from a cave in Texas in Big Bend National Park. And that also would be another suitable site to reintroduce condors because there's remote caves there and nest sites. And they used to be there anyway in the Pleistocene. So restoring the condor to its original habitat, that would be a good place to go too. There's still the problem of lead shot that needs to be corrected because that gets left in carcasses and condors eat that and die from lead poisoning, as well as other birds, other scavengers. So that's still going to be a problem everywhere. But other than that, I think Big Bend would be a great place for condors to be reintroduced next.
That's right. And I just wanted to show the audience this book that you gave me a couple of years ago when I came to visit you at UNCW, I think. And it's by Carl B. Crawford, The California Condor. You can't really see it because my screen is blurred, but I still have it next to my desk. And I just love the condor. I think it's a great story. All of your research with it is just so cool. I love hearing what you're still doing with them.
Yeah. That book is the best on the natural history of the condors. Carl Coper did that, and he, when I named a new species of gymnogyps, that's the genus of California condor from Florida, from the early Pleistocene, I named it Gymnogyps coperdi for his work on that species, the living species. So, yeah, valuable contribution.
Wow. I didn't know you found a new species in Florida.
Yeah, that was back in the 80s when I first started doing my dissertation research. There's really good fossil sites there, and this was a site that dated about what was it? About 2 million years old, and so it looked identical. This fossil looked identical to the living condor, but the bill that was recovered was a little bit different. It was enough to show it was a new species, and so I described it and named it after Coper.
Is that the species that you have at the La Brea tar pits that you showed me that one time? Okay.
That's a later species. And there's Gymnogyps californianus there, and it's a subspecies, Gymnogyps californianus amplus, that was larger or more robust in the Pleistocene, but not different enough to be a separate species. And there might have been two subspecies in the Pleistocene, one that was more gracile and this more robust one, but not that different otherwise. So this one from Florida is even earlier in age. So you might even say the California condor should be called the Florida condor. But I don't think they would like that in California.
I don't think that would go over well.
So what were the species that you were studying from the La Brea tar pits when I came to visit you that one time? Refresh my memory, because we do have pictures of that we can definitely show with the interview today too.
Yeah, there's a number of extinct species there. Teratorn's another one that's related to vultures. It's an enigmatic species that had a different morphology that we really don't know exactly what it did. There's no living counterpart for its morphology, and it was larger than California condor. So it's not that abundant outside of La Brea. It's been found in a few other cave sites, but it probably did not nest in caves like condors, so we don't have a good record of it. There was, of course, I was looking at the California condor and then this extinct one too when you were there, plus identifying other birds from these caves that make the La Brea tar pits a valuable resource because they've got such a diversity of species that are preserved from those pits. It was a big natural trap and attracted all these birds and mammals, and so there's thousands of bones, and some species like saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, there's hundreds of skulls of them, very well preserved. So it's a gold mine in terms of having comparative material for identifying fossils from other locations, and for birds too. So it was real exciting to be there and show you that collection. And very few people studying birds from the Pleistocene these days, and mostly it's either much older bird remains from the Cretaceous or Jurassic Cretaceous. But Pleistocene birds not getting studied that much anymore. So I hope someone gets interested in them too. So I'm not the last of the avian paleontologists working with vertebrate birds.
I was definitely very inspired after seeing you that one day because I had been coming from a field project in the San Gabriel Reservoir. I think it was in, where was it, Azusa near Pasadena. And you told me you were in town, and I was like, oh, I might be able to come catch you at the end of my field day. And I just thought, how great is this that, I was sitting front row in your class and moved out to California in pursuit of ornithology. And I got to tell you that that's exactly what I was doing that day when I came
Yeah,
to visit you. And you showed me all of your research, and that was really fun.
yeah, and I'm really happy to see how successful you've been and how well you've done out there too. It's really great.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, it's been a journey. That was, I think, maybe 3 summers ago that I saw you in LA, and then
Mhm.
I got to see you again in North Carolina last year, and you actually showed me that Adélie penguin mummy, and you
Oh yeah,
mentioned that that was like in National Geographic or at the Smithsonian, I think.
yeah, not National Geographic. It was in. It's been used by the media a few times in stories about some of the research we published, and probably will be used again for this RNA study when it gets published. So, becoming a famous mummy.
Yeah. Have you named it?
What's that?
Have you named the mummy?
No, I actually haven't. Maybe I should.
Yeah, maybe you should.
What would be a fitting name for an Adélie penguin mummy? I don't even know.
I don't know.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
So when you are conducting these different research and these different sites, for instance, in Florida and then Texas with the caves and same with Grand Canyon, are you aware of these sites beforehand, or are you just kind of like, I have a feeling maybe they would be here and then you discover it? What is the process for that?
Well, in the Grand Canyon, we were just climbing up the caves to check them out. That's the only way to do it. We didn't have drones or anything to go up in there and look for us.
Yeah.
Just had to climb up and check it out. But a lot of the caves we went up to, especially the ones that were favorable to condors, had their remains preserved in them because they're dry caves, very arid and region there. So anything that dies in those caves also mummifies. So we were finding that. In the Antarctic, it was you go to ice-free terrain where the Adélie penguins would require that ice-free terrain for their breeding, and just start looking for these pebble mounds. And after a while, you get a search image for them. They really stand out on the landscape because of the sorted pebbles that are there versus the boulders and other rocks that are larger all around. And so you can find those sites that way and probe into them, and you find the pink colored soil and the feathers and eggshell, and you've got an ancient colony there.
Very cool. What does it take in terms of the environment to mummify something?
Mainly just constant conditions. So whether it's always wet or always dry, things will preserve. Acid conditions like peat bogs will also preserve things really well, and tissues too. But if you have a cave that's wet and dry with water flow through it or something, then you probably won't get that good a preservation.
Oh, I see.
But
Okay.
these caves in Grand Canyon are always dry. They've been dry for 10,000 years. And so you can find all kinds of things preserved in there, from plant remains and pack rat middens to bones in the sediments. And even on the surface, you can find bones that are 10,000 years old. So it's pretty amazing.
Wow. Awesome.
Well, Steve, are there any final thoughts you wanted to share with our listeners about the importance of Antarctica, or just stories, a quote, or maybe something hopeful to leave our listeners with?
Well, just knowing about Antarctica is good. It's very important in the global climate cycle, and it's really important to protect it as well for wildlife as like a world park. And so it's important that the Antarctic Treaty stays intact for the future, and that's all political. But it's good that people know about it and why it's important, because it really is. And most people will never go there and never see it, so it's off their radar. But it's extremely important in terms of world climate and ocean circulation, what the sea ice does for annually for producing ocean currents that extend all the way up to the Arctic. So these are very important things to understand, and so keeping that continent intact like it is essential, I think. So we just that's why I like to teach my class, so more and more students know about it. And I tell my students every year, once they finish that class, they will be only 1% of people on the planet who know about Antarctica, less than 1% really. Because you can stop anybody on the street and ask them about Antarctica, and they will just they'll say, "Oh, up there," or "There are polar bears there." You know, all these things that they're common misinterpretations of what the Antarctic is. So I'll keep teaching, and that's why I did the podcast too. And hopefully, more and more people will get excited about the Antarctic.
Well, I certainly am. I was one of those people that didn't know much about it, so I'm happy to walk away with more knowledge than I had before. One
Yeah.
thing I was wondering is, are the penguins that you study considered, or penguins in general, considered keystone species there?
Well, you can call them different things. The krill would be a keystone species in the Antarctic because so many species depend on it.
Right.
Penguins would be a good climate indicator species because it's higher up on the food chain. And so when their populations are impacted, when there's some change in the environment at the base of the food chain, for instance, you'll see it at the top first and not at the bottom. So they are good sentinel species for recognizing changes that are occurring. So that's their value there.
Gotcha.
Well, I know I'm certainly always inspired by your stories going to Antarctica. And I told myself before I turned 30 that I would go there. And I have 6 months left to do that. So,
Oh,
but I made it to Africa last summer. So I'm like, okay, the other A works, the other A continent. But
Move it to 40.
yeah, right. It's definitely a place on my bucket list. And I'm so glad I took your class all those years ago. And um,
yeah.
I tell people that's what inspired me to pursue wildlife biology was just hearing your stories about doing all kinds of cool field work with penguins. I was like, what? I didn't
Mhm.
know this was a thing. I want to do that. I want to work with endangered species, although Adélie penguins are not endangered, but still studying wildlife. And here we are talking about all of our field stories and interacting
Yeah.
along the way. And hopefully I can still make it to Antarctica with you one day.
Yeah, no, you've done great, and now you have your own stories, so that's wonderful.
Thanks,
That's
Steve.
what you got to do. You got to get out there and make your own stories.
That's right. And follow your interest and see what happens. That's what you always told me. And that interest has never wavered. And now it's being poured into a podcast and this community we're building here. And we're so happy to have you a part of it.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anxiety into action. What is some anxiety coming out of this episode that we can turn into some action for our listeners?
I would say watching the movie that we mentioned in this episode with Steve, which is about the Ross Sea in Antarctica. And I watched this after learning about the MPA that failed to protect the Ross Sea, and it's inspired hope in me. It was a really well done documentary, and I think that's a great way to turn anxiety into action is to be fueled by something that gives you hope. So go watch that movie on Apple TV. I'll link it in the show notes.
I love that. Yeah. My anxiety into action bit today is about the Antarctic Treaty that we talk about and the fact that there is an expiration date. So I think that it's important to let your representatives know that this is something that you care about and that you would like to see continued support with your country. So for the United States, that would be calling your local representatives. And then if you're in another country, finding out how you can let your government know that this is important to you and that you definitely think that it's something that needs to continue to stay protected, because it's important for our planet as a whole that this area is untouched. So I think using your voice, as we always advocate for being an advocate on this podcast.
Love that. Well said. The Antarctic Treaty gives me hope as well. It's like this is the one place in the world where all different nations come together to agree about something, and it's to protect the beauty of Antarctica and, allow research and all of that good stuff as the treaty sees fit.
All right, you guys. Over and out.
Over and out, gang.
If you're listening, the Zoom just, I don't know what.
Balloons just popped up.
Balloons.
That just means Zoom agrees with me that we're going to Antarctica now.
Yeah. All right, bye, planet people.
Peace out.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Planet People. We are thrilled to have you as part of our community of wildlifers who care about protecting the planet for future generations to enjoy.
We hope that by listening, you feel inspired to connect with nature and become a steward of the planet by getting involved and taking action with your local community conservation organizations. Until next time, stay positive, planet people.
This episode was produced by Natalie Jean Sybil, Coral Carson, and Hugh Carr. Directed and edited by Coral Carson. Theme song by Hugh Carr under the artist name Flama. Thank you, team.